You are now entering the Sanctum.
Hello, and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay with John and TJ, and we are excited today to be joined by actor, writer, producer, Mr. Andre Gower. Andre, welcome to the Sanctum.
Good to be in the sanctum, I guess. I guess that's a good thing. It sounds a little scary, but
It depends. It depends,
yeah,
good or
it's fun.
bad. We think
Yeah.
it'll be good this time. So, you've been in several films and television series, but everyone will probably recognize you most from 1987's Monster Squad, which I know is one of our favorite, I guess, family horror films, gateway horror films, if you will, where you played Sean. So we're just going to start there. Sean's character, wisecracking, classic monster obsessed kid, wears the Stephen King rule shirt, which I am donning today in honor of you. So I was just curious, how close was that to you at that age? Did you really have to act, or were you kind of being more yourself in that role?
It's interesting because some people know or don't know that I actually never auditioned at all for the role of Sean. All of my initial auditions and callbacks and screen tests and everything were actually all for Rudy. And that makes sense if you look, back in time a little bit with my body of work on TV and some other stuff, just prior to Monster Squad. I was always, cool kid, a lot of hair product, leather jacket, something like that. So that's obviously the role you go read for. Well, ended up getting cast as Sean, just straight out of my Rudy auditions. Either said, you're much too dorky to be Rudy, or yeah, something about having, which was guaranteed part of it. Um, you know, but let's take on this, let's give this kid this to take on the lead role here. And kind of when you look at a Sean, you're right. He's kind of wisecracking, hanging out with his buddies. But he's the point man. He's the leader of the squad. And all of us that grew up in friend groups and teams and things like that, there's always somebody. And if you can't figure out who that lead of your group is, it's probably you. And I think people just naturally take to it, in out in the wild. And but that's how we figure out who we are. And you asked if that was sort of me, and I think that's kind of why it probably resonated, with the powers that be that made the decisions to take the hair gel out of my hair and give me clothes that don't fit very well and say, hey, go dork out and boss these other kids around a little bit. And the dork part I got, kind of the kind of know-it-all kind of management, management style. It's but that just comes from being able to see the big picture, work with your resources at hand, and delegate and put things and people in their places that get the job done. And I guess that's kind of it kind of works. So at 13, I guess that worked then too. So it's something that I continue to strive to do.
I was that kid too. I was very nerdy, but I also found myself as the leader of my friend group, which was kind of strange because I was well reserved, but somehow the cream rose to the top there. But you actually answered my second question: what was the audition process? So you didn't have to audition at all.
Not for Sean. Yeah, it was a lengthy auditioning kind of segment, but all on scenes for Rudy, and dressing and acting like what I thought that character would be. And and usually when someone says, okay, you're not getting this role, but let's have you come in and read maybe for another role, or let's this role in particular specifically. And that happens a lot. And luckily for me, I mean, it didn't happen. Because who knows, I may have auditioned for Sean and been like, no, this guy sucks. And but everybody, at this in this era, in summer of 86 ish, fall of 86, everybody in town of a certain age is reading for every single script that's getting cast at the time. And it's vice versa. Everybody read for Monster Squad, and I'm reading for everything else out there, when you're in this kind of, window of, younger talent and of a certain age. And I just, it's really interesting that, reading for Rudy and then never auditioning for Sean, but the group that made the decisions, thought of me when they were trying to fill that role for Sean Crenshaw, and said, let's have Andre Gower do that, and just, straight off like that, instead of coming in to meet about it again.
Yeah, that's nice. So there's a documentary, which you have it behind you. Wolfman's Got Nards, which is just fantastic about the making of and everything.
Oh, thank you.
I
All you
watched it like
guys'
5 times. I watched it
relationships.
again today.
Yeah, it's so good and super emotional. Like documentaries that get emotional always get me. But in the documentary, which is available on Tubi if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. Ashley Banks said she was terrified of Duncan, who played Dracula. Were you terrified of any of the characters you were working with, or did you realize, hey, it's so and so in makeup, not a big deal?
Well, the fun story is everybody always asks, like, hey, how was it? What was it like working with Tom Noonan? And what was it like working with Duncan Regeer? Like, I have no idea. We didn't work with Tom Noonan. We did not work with Duncan Regeer. We worked with fucking Dracula and Frankenstein's monster. And Duncan took it to one level of, being very aware that he wanted to never be around us, except for if we were doing a scene. And so everybody was on set, in costume, in character, and he didn't want to dilute that sort of, kind of sinister air about him, which I don't know if you could dilute that with acid, but especially, but I mean, in real life, he's spectacular. But so he really kind of stayed, he was on set, off set, front of the camera, gone, and we never really, got to see him too much. Tom Noonan took it to another level, where not only is he also a method actor and, stays, in that space, he never breaks character either, whether he's walking from his dressing room to the set or hanging out for 30-minute breaks or whatever. He is Frankenstein's monster the whole time. So we had no idea who these people were. And about a month into shooting, I guess I got I got tired of not knowing who this Tom Noonan guy is, because he's in this makeup and lumbering around and bleh. And I went to my neighborhood video store where I get all my movies, and had to rent Manhunter to see what this guy looked like. And that was a mistake.
I bet that was.
Even more terrifying.
Yeah, because then I didn't want to go to work with this guy anymore. I was like, oh, this guy's terrifying. But what it is you just saw sort of the gravitas that these people have, and the ability that they, kind of exude, and you're just kind of enveloped in that a little bit.
Yeah, I honestly think it's probably my favorite Gilman costume.
Oh yeah,
and
totally.
pretty close to my favorite werewolf design as well. Like I know in the documentary they talked about how Universal's like, yeah, do what you want with the characters, and they did, and it turned out great. Like that's probably what resonates with me the most about the movie, besides seeing it at a young age and like, man, I wish I could fight classic monsters, but those costumes were just so spectacular.
Yeah, they were, and it was it was a little bit, it was a hindrance at the beginning for those guys, that we didn't know at the time, that they thought they were going to be able to recreate their classic kind of images of these monsters, and but then they had to pivot, because some of the actual makeups and sort of the designs were still being used in the theme parks, and so they had to which I think actually saved, or not saved, but just made it even better, that they had to go and reimagine these classic things and really come up with their own, kind of take on not just the aesthetic look, but also the technical and machinations of how to design and build and operate these monster suits. And it was just fascinating to kind of see that end product and work with that, for weeks and weeks. And that's one of my favorite bits in the documentary is talking with those guys that were able to do that and see their enthusiasm, because they think back, this is 1987, 1986, making the movie, and these were all young 20 something nobody, young guy effects heads, and they end up now a few years after Monster Squad and years of just changing the game, they're all now the icons of the industry. And really it made a paradigm shift in that late 80s era, because these were the guys working at a Stan Winston shop that really reinvented how that stuff's done, and became the go-to people. And now they're gigantic icons themselves.
Something that's always interesting to me about people in character in films, especially when you're playing like a villain or a monster. From your recollection, when you see these people in costume like Tom Noonan or Duncan or the Gillman, are they like? Is it one of those things where you're like at catering and they're just like totally in costume, like if you come up to Frankenstein, he's like, good. Like, are they just totally like nothing below the character? Is that how they're interacting with you the whole time?
Yeah, it depends on who it is, but Duncan wouldn't even go like to meals, and like he would, if he was not in front of the camera, he was off.
Wow.
Tom as Frankenstein's monster, sort of the same thing, but there's setups when you're making a movie. You can have 10, 15, 20 minutes of just sitting there waiting for the lights and camera to get in position. And Ryan's got his iconic story is he's sitting in a treehouse for an over the shoulder shot, and Tom Noonan, it's just him and Tom, or it's just him and Frankenstein's monster. And Ryan's like, yeah, well, it's kind of a tight fit in here. It's like, how you doing? Doing all right, or something like that? And he's like, ugh. And Ryan's like, no, I know how this. I know you're Tom Noonan. You're an actor. I've seen all your movies. So what's going on? Like, how is it hot in there? And he's like, ugh. And Ryan's like, all right, this is another level. But and then on the opposite end of that is especially someone like Michael McKay, who I think the Mummy is a really awesome creature build. And when you look at the detail of that, it's just fascinating. But then to see this guy Michael get wrapped up and put into this effects makeup and costume, he actually would come and eat, and it was very hard because that he's wrapped in layers, but then there's facial pieces and eye socket pieces, and you got to take a jaw off to like get some some sandwich in his mouth or something. And we actually kind of helped him out with that, like, here's a straw. And I remember Michael Faustino, who played Eugene, really kind of befriended Michael in costume. And because it's hard to see in that stuff, like you can't see where you're going, it's like you have no dexterity or whatever. And so Michael would Faustino would take McKay around and lead him around and make sure he wasn't going to trip over something, I think. But it's just you can't really single out one of the better costumes, and with the monsters themselves, because they're all original, they're all unique and game changing. And like you mentioned, the Gillman suit is one of the first times they ever built anything like that. So it was that's a neat accomplishment to be a part of that.
It's so visceral even as a kid watching that movie, because there's so much about it that it works as like a transitional film for kids getting into horror, but it is scary. I mean, when Duncan picks up the little girl and screams at her, that's real. Like when you're little, you're like, holy shit, this is a vampire, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that like, as far as, you're a child actor, you're filming this movie. Did you have any inclination at any point around that time, like, wow, this is going to be something special? Or were you just kind of like, I'm working, it's a job? Like, what was your mindset like?
Well, I mean, it's when you're working. I mean, it's shooting a big movie like that, shooting anything that has some sort of resource behind it is a job. It's work. It's a lot of work. It's long hours, but the kids can only be there for a short amount of time, so you've got to get all your stuff in. So you've got to have your work hat on. But also, while you're making this, you realized that this is really cool. Like, there's a lot going on here. And so I would stay after, I was technically done working, and stay a couple hours after and watch them make the rest of the movie. And, I saw some of the stunts and the action, and, Wolfman blowing up in midair. Like, I was standing behind the camera when that happened. So that was kind of neat to see, because you knew that this was something that, hadn't been done before. This is gonna be an awesome movie. And so you knew that going in and during, but what you're expecting is that this movie's going to open up and it's going to be huge, and they're gonna talk sequels like in the second week of the box office, and we're gonna have our own Burger King glasses and action figures and stuff like that. And what ended up happening is the movie absolutely tanks in the box office and it disappears after a week. And so that's a completely different kind of brick wall you run into with your expectations.
Can you even imagine
Yeah.
how much that shit would be worth if they did make it, like the glasses and everything today?
Oh man,
Man,
so
they'd be on my
much.
shelf right now.
Well, it's
Well, yeah, who knows? I think it'd be neat. Burger King redid their, kind of branding and their logos a couple years ago to actually their old school vintage kind of look. And I was like, you should just bring back some old glasses, and they should do a run of glasses for things that you never actually got to do. And that would be, I think there'd be a bunch of, 46-and-a-half-year-old Monster Squad fans running around to Burger King to get a Horus glass or something.
I would buy it hands down.
Same.
As far as this movie is so important to so many people. As a kid, it was a big deal for me. I growing up in a small town, I probably never thought about it as far as a bigger community, like who knows this movie, where does it stand with everyone? But it was always legendary. Even before I first rented it, I had heard about it. Do you have a movie for you that represents that for you as a child? I wondered if there's something for you that's kind of like that type of film, like your Monster Squad, that you were a fan of.
That other people didn't know, and I like.
Or maybe like something that you
Oh, that's a
hold
good
true as
question.
like a transitional type movie as a kid, like a horror movie where you're like, this was the one that got me really, hooked.
I don't know. It's a good question. Let me noodle that for a minute, and as something will come to me. But usually with me, like films, go to the movies all the time, and I wasn't just a horror fan. But I'd watch the old horror movies at night on TV or on Saturday mornings, and or dead air programming times back in the day with broadcast. And and then we'd go to the movies like every weekend, like our parent, have our friends drop us off, or like you ride your bike to the mall, and you just consume so many of any, whether it's an action movie or it's Chuck Norris, or it's uh, uh, a rom-com or an Eddie Murphy comedy, something like that, or sci-fi. I was a big sci-fi fan, so
Mhm.
sci-fi was always top of the list for me. And then if it was a Cold War spy movie or something, my dad and I were probably there. If Gene Hackman was in it or something, we're in the seats. And so it was just almost everything. Like, I don't know if there's one movie that stands out to answer that question. I think it's the experience of going to those movies, meaning all of them. That is a singular experience over time.
Mhm.
And I think those experiences and how you're affected by them and how you walk out. But yeah, I think probably that I was caught up in the 80s, with a lot of the canon movies and the Golden Globus spectaculars, and anything with Sho Kosugi in it, I was
Oh
like
yeah.
Yes, ninja
die hard.
movies.
Enter the
Yes.
Ninja. Yeah.
And so but what that stemmed from was actually when I was it was fifth grade at my that school that I went to in fifth grade. I had a great teacher named Mrs. Goebel. And every grade, I'm fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, we did extra curricula stuff, not extra credits. So like, it was extra added stuff. And we studied the country of Japan the entire fifth grade year. Like, I did all these reports and went to field trips and watched movies, and not ninja movies, but watched movies and documentaries and read books about Japan and learned the history and the culture. And that I got fascinated with that. And this was all happening at the same time. So ever since then, I've been fascinated with Japan as a country, Japanese history, Japanese culture. And then you're smack dab in the Shokuzuki era, and as a lame kid in the suburbs, running around pretending you're hanging out with Shokuzugi. And but instead of just like a Halloween costume, I mean, I was studying the history. Like, it was really interesting. And so probably that era of those type of uh of films, if I had to pick one that was super, super important.
Mhm.
And then you're just reading all these books and go to these specialty stores that now you can find them all over the place, but you have to go to like this weird, martial arts supply store to find a book on somebody like a tournament, karate champion or something, and read their life story or their fictional series or something like that. And so probably that. And then, like I said, I'm a Cold War kid, and
Mhm.
um, the movie that might have impacted me the most that still hits hard is Red Dawn.
Yeah, it's a classic. Red Dawn's
Because
awesome.
yeah, a lot of people ask, they associate me with Monster Squad, of course, and it's like, oh, it's my favorite kids adventure movie. And everybody always asks me what my favorite kids adventure movie is, and I say Red Dawn. And they go, that's not a kids adventure movie. I was like, no, that's the ultimate kids adventure movie, because it's very real. There's a body count and nobody makes it out. It's like, but this was sort of like a extreme, kind of fever dream of what we all grew up in thinking, could this happen? We all were under the specter of someone hits 2 or 3 buttons and we're all incinerated overnight. And but this was different. This was a little more on the ground and real and small time, and kids banding together to literally save their world. And so you connect with that a little bit.
How'd you
Yeah.
feel about the remake?
Mhm.
There is no remake, Jay. That does
Right.
not.
Good answer.
Did you are you surprised at all that in 2024 there hasn't been a horror film like Monster Squad that's hit like that, for in the sense of being like a gateway film, a film that kids remember, that's held so dear? I don't feel like there's a film like it in the past 30 something years. I mean, some people might say Shaun of the Dead did that for some people, but it's not the same type of vibe. I just
Shaun
wonder
of the
what
Dead
you
says fuck too much. They use too
Yeah,
much
right.
Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
That's
It's
my
not
I made my mom watch it.
PG-13.
She's like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, am I surprised? No. Why am I not surprised is, kind of insider information is, if we're talking about kids, like Shaun of the Dead is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Oh yeah.
And like,
sure.
anybody asks me what my favorite horror movies are, they're all the comedies. It's the horror comedies. It's Young Frankenstein. It's Shaun of the Dead. It's Motel Hell. Things like that. So,
Nice.
Classic.
the but I'm not surprised. And the answer to the question is because you can't make a movie like that anymore. You're not allowed to. It's not just someone hasn't done it. You're not allowed to do the shit that we did in this movie as children.
Yeah,
And
it's very not PC now.
it's just not allowed. And let alone just not just the language or problematic dialogue or situational comedy or content, but it's like the kids in peril. It's like Rudy's smoking and like shooting a bow and arrow. It's something like you can't do that because they're afraid everybody's going to go out and ride around in a convertible Land Rover and shoot trees with a bow and arrow, which they're doing anyway. It's like, that's the movie's not going to make them do it more, but it might. Um, but have we seen the things that kind of impact kids today, because adventure and thrills and scares, to a younger audience, have they hit in a way? Yes. So we've seen the impact of that in different ways. And I mean, if you want to go direct impact or direct kind of bleeding into from Monster Squad, it's something like Stranger Things, which is a huge impact on middle teenagers and adults too, because it scratches on that nostalgia itch. But I think probably the thing that did the biggest impact of that, keeping it okay for kids, but they were genius in the way they did the build up of everything, is all the Harry Potter features. And because it's fantasy, it's wizardry, literally it's wizardry and magic, which is always sort of lighthearted and fun. But this was scary, and it got it had an underlying thing of evil throughout. But I love what they did. No, I mean the books do it too, but the movies, the movies grew and got older with the audience, and so they got deeper, darker, scarier, deadlier, as we went through those, what is it, 8 films or whatever. And every single one of those films still kind of holds up. And especially if you're, and I saw them as an adult and absolutely love. Once you get to 3, once you get to Azkaban, they're all fantastic. Once they went dark, it's great. But I think kids are okay, they resonate with that, and that was, sort of like it leads them along and it grows with them. But things like Stranger Things, it hits, and they love the intrigue and the fantasticalness of it, and the scares and the peril. I think we went a long time with there's no kids in peril, and I think we're seeing the result of that because we never got any entertainment with kids in peril. That kids, when they're real, they don't know how to. Everybody's protecting on all fronts of kids in peril, and no one. But that's how you learn how to do stuff outside your house.
Yeah, I think that's
And
one of the reasons
I think we lack that for a while.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons the It remake really hit pretty hard the way it did. It was one of those first films in years that I could see where kids were in peril again.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean that's a perfect example, and I think sort of maybe we're coming back to that a little bit because we're not as coddling. I don't know if that's for a terrible word choice, protective, cushioning. The problem, I'm not getting political, but everybody thinks their kids are precious snowflakes, and if you but the problem is if you wrap up your precious snowflake in all this batting and marshmallows and blankets and feel like they melt. Like
Right.
you literally melt your own snowflake, and you got to let the snowflake fly out there and get crystallized and learn how to weather the elements a little bit, whether that's actual being outside and weathering the elements, or weathering the elements of growing up and learning how to deal with other kids of your age or in the neighborhood or at school, and getting past those hurdles and obstacles of human existence. And I think we went for about a 25-year period where we weren't letting kids do anything. And the result of that is a bunch of 30-year-olds that can't do shit.
I think
Right.
Terrifier 3 is going to change that drastically when it comes out. Like the only
Or it's
stuff you're
probably
really
going to end the
seeing
movies.
is the little
It's gonna
girl
end the
coming
movies.
down.
Like, no more movies. Yeah, no more movies anymore. Like, the Terrifier guy, the art, the client, like, no, banned. It's like booze in 1928. It's prohibited. It's no more. It's illegal. But yeah, and I think, and that's okay. But and I was listening to somebody, I can't remember what it was. It was a great, kind of talk about that same thing, even with children's programming, like cartoons and even, primetime or daytime stuff on Saturdays. It was adventurous, and it was kind of, there's problem solving. And then, for about a 20-year period, it's just, let's find a safe place on a map and like go there where like, like the flowers talk to you and stuff. I was like, yeah, that's interesting, because I wasn't even all this, younger programming when you're 30, 40 years old, you're not paying attention to. Like, wow, there's a lot of that out there. Where's the adventure? Where's the peril? Where's the problem solving? And maybe we're going back to that a little bit, maybe.
I sure hope so. Yeah. So I'm curious. So this was your first feature film, correct?
Technically second, but yeah, it's first as in of that size and of that age. I had done another feature when I had done so much television. I didn't really have a lot of time for other features.
Right,
but,
right. Yeah, you did a lot of
yeah,
television.
I did a feature in the late 70s called, which got released as Kiss My Grits, with Bruce Davison and Bruno Kirby. And this was cool, kind of like lower budge heist Southern Texas town movie that we shot in LA, which was just really cool because it was a young Bruce Davison who becomes one of your most iconic faces in whatever movie you're watching. But yeah, go ahead. You're
Okay.
continue.
I was just curious if there was any kind of like transition from how a television set would work, right, to how the locations and different things for the feature. What was that like? Did you have to learn any new skills or any transition there?
Well, as as a performer in either, I think or in both rather, the biggest difference, shooting a feature for, I think we're shooting Monster Squad for like 3.5 months. And if you're on a television series and you're a lead character, you're about doing an episode a week. So you're starting and wrapping your script like every couple days, every 5 days. When you're shooting a big feature, you don't shoot it in order, and you don't necessarily shoot even the day in order. So, in the morning, you're doing some part of the movie, and then the afternoon, depending on where you are because of timing, budget, efficiencies, you could have to turn around and stay on that stage in the kitchen and do the scene that's at the end of the movie. And so really the skill that you have to learn and stay focused on is where you are in the story. And nowadays it's even harder because they shoot so many more pages a day because they're trying to cram movies in such a shorter time frame. And you kind of see it suffer sometimes on depending on what you're watching. But I would say that's probably the most I don't want to say it's daunting task, but probably the biggest task is because you're doing an episodic, you're like, oh, this is episode 5, and this is where the guest star comes in and says this joke, and then like, okay, we've rehearsed, okay, and then you do it, and then you're done at the end of the day, and you're literally on a next script next Monday. Doing a feature, I mean, you could be bouncing from scene 2 to scene 5, and then scene 35, and then back to scene 11, and you've got to kind of keep where that story is in your head and what you're supposed to look like or be acting like or paying attention to certain things. So I think as kids, that's probably harder for some to grasp that overall kind of point of view. But I think everybody, it depends on who you have around you. And I think that's one thing that Fred Dekker, is the co-writer and the director who was right there with us every day, all day. You know, we didn't just see Fred when we walked in front of the camera. Like, we were interacting, we were talking about what was going on each day, where things needed to be, where we were in the story, and what he wanted, to be brought out whenever we were out there. And I think that probably played a big part in making it a little bit easier.
So I'm curious, did you get a chance to watch Night of the Creeps at all before you got a chance to work with Fred?
I don't think I watched it before because I'm not quite sure if it was out on video yet. I don't remember the
Yeah, it might not
timeline
have
of
been because they were back to
because
back.
it was shortly after. But I did see it eventually. It was it's interesting because the lead in Fred's first movie was a lifelong friend of mine, Jason Lively, and his whole family is an acting family, and his younger sister Robin and I are actually of the same age. Jason's a year or two older. And but we all grew up together, so we've known each other since we were super little, and it's neat to sort of be tied in with Jason and Night of the Creeps and the Fred Dekker universe, and which should be much bigger than it is. And but Creeps is cool, and then you learn about the Easter egg in Night of the Creeps in the bathroom, and
Yeah,
you see it, you're like, oh, that's pretty rad. That's neat how they do
he
stuff like
called his
that.
shot.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm curious, at had you ever, because I was one of those kids that was just going through the movie store. This was one of my gateways, but I was making my way through all the Stephen King adaptations, all the things until I
Oh
could
yeah.
get to the R-rated things, right? And somewhere along the line, I think on reruns on TV, before I had got to rent Monster Squad, the movie, I was aware of a Monster Squad, not the Monster Squad, but Monster Squad TV show from the 70s. It
Right.
was a wildly different thing. Do,
Very different.
have you ever gotten any like confusion around that, or had you been aware of that series and thought maybe that would have some connection with what you were auditioning for?
Not at the time of auditioning, because I had no idea what the Fred Grandy show was. To me, Fred Grandy was, from Love Boat,
Yeah, right.
and but it was years later, even after I think Monster Squad came out, the movie, that we knew that there was a TV show in the 70s called the Monster Squad. Um, and I don't, sometimes when we're appearing somewhere or doing a convention appearance or a screening, people will mention it, but it's usually not kids. It's
Yeah.
usually it's usually the parents of the original fans who are now 60 or 60 or more at the time, because when that show was out, Monster Squad fans that were born in you know 73, so they weren't watching that TV show, and so it's usually their parents that would come and mention it. And yeah, there's some fun stories there. But it wasn't confusion, didn't kind of put those things together at the time at all.
Yeah, I think it only ran like one season.
Yeah, it was very short-lived, I think.
Yeah. But I'm curious. So, at what point? Because this come out, it was in its time not received very well box office wise, but then got a second life on HBO, on cable, on VHS. At what point did you really start to get the groundswell of this is actually got a huge following and is like a super cult hit?
Not until 2006.
2006. Was it when they
Um,
were releasing the anniversary DVD or?
no, it was about just under a year before that. Not quite a year prior to the actual release of that. Or actually maybe a little bit over a year. The the singular spark that launched kind of the resurgence that we wouldn't be here talking about this if it didn't happen was that very first cast reunion screening retro 35 millimeter print of Monster Squad at the original Alamo Drafthouse Cinema in Austin, Texas.
Which you're repping the hat of. Well
Oh
done.
yeah, I sure, yeah.
My wife's from
I have
Austin,
like
so I'm a big
yeah.
Alamo
So
Draft House
yeah,
fan.
and back in the day there was one Alamo, and it was on downtown. It wasn't even it moved, and it was kind of like in this upper level of this kind of industrial area, and it was kind of tight. It was like you're watching a movie with 100 people in an attic, and it was really cool. But no, we didn't. We had no idea. They kind of reached out and randomly got in touch with me, and then they got in touch with Ryan, and I had just actually had emailed Ashley for the first time in probably ever, since email came out, but hadn't seen her since probably my 18th birthday party or something, um, and then they got Fred, and they flew us into Austin and we're like, you want to watch what? And they're like, yeah, we found a print, and it's all because of a guy named Eric Vespi who is a movie reviewer, and kind of now he's got a very popular podcast called the King Cast that he started and used to work with Scott Wampler on, and Scott just passed away a couple weeks ago,
Oh no.
but Eric's like one of his favorite movies, or his favorite movie of all time, is Jaws. Totally understandable, but is Monster Squad, and he just wanted to put together a screening because they do cool shit like that there. And we had no idea what that weekend was going to be. And that was the first time that they thought they were going to do a screening, and they had to do two because they sold too many tickets when it went on
Wow.
sale. And they turned people away, and we were like, wait, people want to come take photos and get shit signed? And that was just bonkers. And so we literally owe all of that to Eric and Tim League, and even more so an awesome dude named Aaron Morgan, who's the guy that reached out to me that worked with Eric at a movie site at the time, and said, hey, we're trying to get a hold of you guys. Is this something you'd be interested in? And luckily we were, and said, yeah, let's go. And it just went bonkers after that. And then a year later, we're co-headlining a giant horror con, which we had never been to, in Monster Mania in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and Dave Hagen's show. And we're like, what is that? Like, what happens what's going on? And that's where they were there on site to do the interviews for the DVD, and we didn't even know there was a DVD coming out. And it was sort of a kerfuffle that afternoon. I was like, that's not happening. No one told us anything about that. And but interestingly enough, Michael Felsher was there, and he does, that's what he does. And he had put a thing together with Lionsgate, because they ended up having the video rights at the time to put something out, and it went absolutely bonkers with selling that DVD in 2007. And we thought that was kind of really neat, and we thought that all this kind of attention and sort of this Monster Squad kind of fan fervor would kind of die out after that, and then maybe we get invited somewhere next summer, which would be summer of 2008, and it didn't slow down. It just kept, and we're still doing it. I mean, it's you know, Ryan Lambert and I are getting on. This is the 22nd. Like we're in 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks. We go on the road for 3 straight appearance events, and then from the end of September to the end of October, we're somewhere every weekend and in between doing screenings or conventions and things like that. And you know, it just keeps rolling, and it's nice to also bring something along as a companion and talk about the documentary, because you know now we have all these stories. Now we almost need to make another documentary, because it's been, you know,
Right.
since 2017 when we were shooting that, and it came out, and you know, we festivaled in 18, and it didn't get released until 2020 and 21. And yeah, it's just crazy that this thing has just kept trucking along.
Very well shot documentary too. One of my top 10 favorite documentaries that is about a singular film and the fandom around the film. And I'm a big
Oh,
fan of that type of thing,
yeah,
you know, being a
yeah,
genre
yeah.
fanatic myself. So
Well,
kudos
appreciate
to you
it,
for
and
that.
it's
I'd be there for a part two too if you decide to do that.
Wolfman's got 2 Nards.
He does have
That
two,
would actually be
ideally.
a really good sequel title to a documentary. Um, I think I think I'm going to use that. And look, thank you, I appreciate that, and I think it turned out better than my wildest dreams. And you know, for you to say, you know, well shot and well put together, that's very little. It's a little me, but it's very little me, and it's mostly my small but awesome production team at Pilgrim Media Group, led by my man Henry McComas, and then Wes Caldwell and Shane Patterson and Aaron Kunkel, and you know, the folks that worked on that had their hands on buttons and hands on cameras and hands on microphones. That we worked on this thing for about 10 months straight, and went on the tour, shot the interviews, did all the stuff, and these guys just kicked it out of the park.
So to kind of wrap things up for tonight, I'm curious, what do you feel like the legacy, the ongoing legacy now, generations of fandom, what do you feel like the legacy of the Monster Squad is and is going to be?
Well, I think the legacy of what it became, or why it connected with people, and that's what, you know, that's the whole reason I made the documentary, is, you know, to tell these stories of these fans, because I knew their stories were a story after we heard them for so many years. I was like, there's something different here, this is deeper. These people are really impacted by this movie for one of a couple different reasons, and they're connected to it, and they will never not be connected to it. And it impacted their world, it changed their life, it changed who they wanted to be. It made them feel better about who they were, and who they were never going to be. And those are the stories we heard. So I think the legacy of it is that it is somehow a meeting point, a gravity spot for all these individuals to come together and celebrate kind of their shared experience with it. Most people say, it's a story of a bunch of misfits that find each other and then end up saving the world. And if we don't find our friends, and we don't keep these, kind of the stuff that we enjoy and love, if we keep them to ourselves and don't share them with the other dorks, we're never going to have our tribe or our squad, and then we won't be able to save the world. And I think we've gotten away from that a little bit, over the last, we're talking about 20 years or so. And I think we've become more individuals again. And so I think the impact of that, and the connection that these, people that are Monster Squad fans felt, about bringing them together, making them feel better about who they were, and then they can always go back to it. And what's interesting about Monster Squad is, yeah, it was made in 1987. The effects are, kind of the era. Our monster designs are fantastic. But the only thing that really dates the movie is some of the clothing, maybe. But what you realize when you really look at it is the mythology about it, the archetypes about it, the sociology about it are all very archetypal, and everybody can connect with something. And what it's become, the legacy, is the impact is what brought all those people together or to this thing and changed their world. the legacy of it is just something that they can always go back to, no matter what year it was made, and they will dive right in, and it'll recharge their batteries, and you can see that every single time. Whether, let's say, Ryan and I, or me and Ryan and Ash, like we're out somewhere at a screening or an appearance, and you meet someone for the first time, that you really see that that's still a really genuine effect and impact on the fan base. That is a little bit different, a little bit deeper, than just, hey, I really thought your movie was cool. That was neat back in the day. Like, good to meet you. This is something that they feel like you're a part of their life.
Yeah, your Uncle Andre, right?
It's it's and it's not only when you meet someone the first time, you meet someone again, you saw 2, 3, 5 years earlier. It's genuine, and everybody just really likes being a part of all this. And you have to appreciate that a little bit, and you have to respect it 100%, because not very many people get to be a part of something like that. So if you understand that a little bit, then you're doing it halfway right.
Well said. Well said. So that's going to be it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and join our group on Facebook. Andre, thank you so much for taking some time with us. We greatly appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. You have anything you want to plug before we sign off?
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. This was great. Looking forward to the next time. Yeah, actually, Ryan and I and some of the other folks, starting, we've got some in August, but I think this has already dropped by then. But we're at GalaxyCon in Des Moines, Iowa, the last weekend of September. We'll be in Omaha, Nebraska, October 1st at the Alamo Drafthouse, doing kind of get together, hangout, screening party. And then we're going to be, we may be somewhere in Florida the next weekend of October, but we're definitely at another GalaxyCon in Richmond, Virginia from the 9th to the 11th. And then if anybody lives anywhere near Salem, Massachusetts, Ryan and I will be in Salem for a very special, unique Monster Squad weekend in Halloween Town Central, going bonkers. And then we've got a bunch of Alamo. We still love the Alamo. We're always invited back, and we call up and make good stuff. So, check your local Alamo. And if we're not there, say you want us, and maybe we'll stop by. And a very cool thing, since we're talking about Wolfman's Got Nards, I appreciate the, input there. As we know, or maybe no, last year, Kino Lorber put out a really cool 4K version of Monster Squad, which everybody tends to really love, and it came out great. It was really neat that they requested to include the documentary as a separate disc in that set, which also gave our fan base an opportunity to own the documentary physically, because our original distributor had no interest in that. The cool thing is what a lot of people don't know is in October, Kino is putting out a standalone release of Wolfman's Got Nards with 60 minutes of special features that no one has ever seen before.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So
Sign me up.
that's going to be very, very neat. So go to Kino, wait for that announcement, or, keep hitting them up on their socials, and, that you're looking forward to seeing Wolfman's Got Nards, the special edition, with the bonus features, because like I said, my guys led by Henry and Wes and all them, really put together some awesome stuff that now the world gets to enjoy and then hold on to and put on their shelf next to all their other stuff.
Nice. And John and I are big physical media guys. I'm surrounded by shelves, so that will definitely be a new addition.
Yep.
We're going to sign off. Before I do, Jackson Stewart told me to tell you hello.
Jackson, yes, my man. Haven't seen Jackson.
We're pals on Instagram, talk back and forth, and
Yeah.
I was watching the documentary, and he's in it, so I took a screenshot. I'm like, looky here, he was so young. He's like, damn. He said you're a boss, and to say hello from him. So
right back at you.
All right, so thank you again. Signing off. I'm Jay with Andre, John, and TJ, and until next time,
keep it spooky.
All right, I have to give one suggestion, Andre, before you leave.
Yeah.
You've got to watch Miami Connection if you've never seen it.
Yes. It's like a canon film that never.
Yeah.
Love it.
I know, I know it. Yeah. I don't think I've seen it in a million years. Yeah.
It's like 80s. It was found by Alamo Drafthouse.
Me and John watched
amazing.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking
of
I
which-
don't think I've seen it in a million years.
We should try and get you guys a screening at the Bell Court. It's one of the most historical theaters in the country here in Nashville. It's over 100 years old. It's like an
Gotcha.
Alamo Draft House.
Yeah, and those are the perfect places to do something like that. So, let them know, have them call me, or because I handle all that. Ryan and I will
Oh,
go.
nice.
We're gonna be on the East Coast. I'm gonna be on the East Coast starting August 1st until the end of October. Ryan goes back and forth a little bit, but yeah, October is fun but full. But look, it's right. Nashville's awesome, so it's good.
Yeah,
I
I'll
love
shoot
Nashville.
you a message. I know the couple of the guys that do a lot of the booking.
Oh
at
yeah,
the
well
Bell
if they want to do
Our ticket to Hawaii is better than Malibu.
Court. Yeah, let them know. They'd have them email me or something like that, or DM me, and it's easy to do. It's and if I can get Ryan there, all the better. If not, I'll pop in myself and run over to Nashville. I got a bunch of friends in Nashville, so it's good.
Yeah,
killer.
that'd be great.
That'd be awesome.
Oh,
Well, thank you
also,
again.
just to let you know, I was that guy that bought the bootleg DVDs of the Japanese laser
The
disc
laser, right.
on DVD, but way before it was on DVD.
That's right. I saw a ton of those in the wild. It was it was very interesting.
I had that and Night of the Creeps on DVD. Yep.
Yep.
Nice.
All right.
All right, man.
Well,
Well,
we'll
thank you
let you go,
again.
man. Thanks so
we'll let
much.
you go.
Yeah.